Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Oxford Business Insights podcasts. Today, we're going to learn about building a modern healthcare clinic from a family practice that started over 50 years ago. So, I'll be delighted to introduce you to James Ruddick of the Summertown Clinic. James, thank you for talking to us today.
Hello, Nick.
Excellent. Well, look, what we're going to talk about a 50-year-old family healthcare business. It's really a long story, and we're going to talk about things that you did to the business when you came in, what it was like when you came in, and how you sort of built the systems to run a modern clinic, but also keep that sort of links to the community and the integrity that always came with the family legacy of running that clinic. But before we get into those interesting topics, James, tell us a little bit about how you got into the whole field of healthcare, because it wasn't a direct route, even though it was a family business that you were kind of brought up in.
Yeah, no, that's right, Nick. Back when I was at school, 16 years old, I got into the England rugby team. And so rugby kind of took over my whole life. And at that time, I'd been interested in medicine. I'd been interested in following a more scientific approach with where I was going to go. So I picked my biology, physics, and chemistry. So I had a good background for that type of thing. But as I say, rugby took over, and I ended up going to New Zealand and then studying sports science at Loughborough. And so it was a completely different tack from, well, quite different anyway, from osteopathy,
Yeah.
which is what I ended up heading towards after I got a job at the end of my time at Loughborough as athletic union president. So I was running the sport up there for a little bit. And I bought a book called Killer CVs. It was when Jerry Maguire was on Show Me the Money. And I thought, oh, I could do that. And I bought this book, Killer CVs, and it was all about what you're good at doing, bad at doing.
Yeah.
And you ask your friends. I never had the chance to do that before and really reflect on who you were as a person. And I thought, I don't want to be sitting behind a desk selling someone else's skills or abilities. I'd like to have a skill or ability I can help people with.
Mhm.
And so I thought about it and thought, oh, I should do what I originally was interested in doing, which was something in the medical world. And having both parents being osteopaths, it was pretty easy to see
Yeah.
how useful their experience and profession had been to people around them. Having grown up with lots of people saying, oh, lovely to see you again, Mr. Ruddick. Oh, is this the little lad you've been telling me about? And by the way, my back's feeling a lot better.
Good. Okay.
Um, so I came to it as a mature student, studied at the British School of Osteopathy. Osteopaths generally do a 4-year full-time degree and or a 5-year part-time degree. And I went down that route before travelling up to Clitheroe, where I worked for 2 years before coming back to Oxford and helping my mum and dad out, who'd been building a practice since 1973 and been at Summertown Clinic since 1975.
And that's where you still are based, isn't it? In the same
That's right.
point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
Amazing.
It's kind of expanded a bit. So it's
Yeah.
a semi-detached home to begin with. There's a lovely photo of me and my twin brother, aged, I think, 6 or 7 weeks outside the front door with my dad, one in each arm. So it really is a very family business. Where I work from just this morning when I was in clinic used to be our lounge.
Right. Okay. Yes. That is interesting. Okay. So look, so that is an interesting background, but it kind of, although you weren't sort of by no means were you sort of forced to go into the family business, and it sort of came logical to do that for you. Is really what it sounds like after your rugby career, going to Loughborough and so forth. Is that fair?
Yeah, very much so. I'd seen the power of the physios and the osteopaths who were involved in rugby at elite level, and could see how hard they worked at trying to keep
Yeah.
us all patched up. My
Okay.
dad was a wonder. I tended to see my dad, I think. Um, it was a wonder at keeping me going through those times. I mean, I
Yeah.
always knocked about a bit playing rugby, um, and so I could really see how they were using their sort of evidence-informed um, sort of information that was guiding their clinical judgment. And I thought, well, this is really interesting because you have the autonomy of being a practitioner, your own skill, and yet you're able to help people and change their quality of life or their functional ability, and in some ways change their lives, which was
Yeah. No, it's
which is
very powerful. Very
a really
powerful.
exciting thing.
Okay, so just tell us a little bit about what the business was like when they started in 1973. That wasn't, I think you said you moved to the current premises in 1975, but sort of what was a mid 70s clinic look like? And we'll talk a bit about what you did to it when you joined some 30 years later. But
Yeah, well, it was a very different sort of medical landscape back then, where
yeah,
doctors knew best. Patients weren't really there to, look up anything
ask,
on
yeah,
Google.
yeah,
So there was a different kind of power paradigm there.
yeah,
And what that meant is that for alternative medicines, as we were known back then, osteopathy was generally kind of more of a quackery, a sort of
right,
slightly um, less understood therapy, and something that GPs and doctors wouldn't generally refer to or be particularly positive about. But it grew a lot after that, and my mum and dad had the foresight to start their practice in what was quite a big building on the Banbury Road at the time, living upstairs and using the downstairs room as their treatment room. And soon they found that they had enough space when someone else wanted to come and join them to develop
right.
into a multidisciplinary practice. So um, I think they had a couple of other practitioners, one called Chris Boardman, who's only just retired, and he was with
Right.
us since 1982. And slowly they sort of built this little group of team of people who were interested in using a room and sharing a space and collaborating really. So
Yeah.
there were plenty of opportunities for my dad particularly and Chris to collaborate over different patients with interesting clinical conundrums that they could share and try and help each other progress
Okay.
as professionals. So um,
Interesting.
that was how it
Okay.
all began.
So that took us through. You joined the practice in 2006, is that right? So
That's right. Yeah,
your
yeah.
parents operated it for sort of over 30 years before you got involved. What was the 2006 version of the business like?
Yeah, so very different. The regulatory landscape had completely changed. So in '92, osteopathy was one of the first professions to be regulated, which meant that we had a lot more foundation to at least have those conversations with GPs and to try and
Right.
sway them with the evidence that there was a building kind of plethora of different, evidence that showed that what we were doing was really important and very useful. And so by the time I got there, osteopathy was much more of a thing that people knew about, and
Oh,
that GPs were referring patients a little bit more frequently and saying, well, look, there are these osteopaths who can help you for low back pain. And the practice had grown, I think, by then to about 12 practitioners. So we were running out of, I think, 5 or 6 rooms at that stage. Um, my parents had just upgraded the building and had done quite a lot of work to the interior to add an extension and things like that. So
right.
trying to improve the space that we were working in. So it was a different landscape professionally, and the clinic had become more of a clinic than a house with a room in it.
Right. Cool.
They developed that over the previous years. So
Yeah.
as a business, it changed a lot as well, because with that comes an increase in income and also lots more responsibility too to those practitioners to service a large number of patients, and to try and keep on top of that through the internet age. And I
Yeah.
think my dad was beginning to find it harder to keep up with things, and so he
Yeah.
was delighted that I would come along and begin to help
Okay.
out.
And so, what was the sort of the biggest shift? Would you say you introduced bringing somebody you had experience working elsewhere? I think you said in Clitheroe, and as well as having done your qualifications, yeah, more recently. Did you bring a change into the thinking? It still seems to be very much a family and client focused business, but what about sort of things like systems and processes? And you mentioned how it was a more regulated environment than it certainly was when your parents started the business.
Yeah, so actually, I think I got a lot from being Athletic Union president, because I could see the way a big business ran.
Right.
So the student union back then had something like £5 million turnover. So as a sabbatical officer, you got to sort of play around with the idea of these figures and where they
Yeah.
went and look at budgets and forecasts and things. That was never part of our training as osteopaths. We
Right.
had pretty much zero business training. Um, and so I got most of it from that idea of looking at the processes and the way that
Yeah.
systematically businesses have a certain operating kind of skeleton, if you like,
Yeah.
um, and trying to get to grips with where our clinic was and how we can manage that better to produce a more efficient clinic that was actually um, a little bit yeah, just more efficient generally. So even things like how we charged the practitioners for their room space, or
Right.
how we looked at the patient journey, for instance. When you work in your practice, I think particularly as much as my dad did, he was very much more involved in the practice as a clinician. Um, you can't, or you don't have the time to spend reflecting on the larger kind
Yeah.
of business process. And as a youngster coming in, I could see all of that, so I got very excited about that and
Yeah.
started digging in and seeing if we could change things up. I guess the biggest thing that I brought was the digitization of electronic health records and
Right.
online booking and changing the website. Um, and looking at making sure that the processes were well enough documented that we could systematically kind of
Right.
onboard receptionists, and then we got a practice manager as well. So that
Yeah.
was really helpful in creating the space to build into.
And how did your father in particular feel about these changes? Was he behind them? Could he see the sense of them, or did he just let you get on with it? Because sometimes, with my coaching hat on, you sometimes see tensions between the generations in family businesses. Shall I put it politely?
Yeah, no, I can well imagine because I came along with lots of brand new ideas and things that were sounded pretty crazy at the time, I think. And my dad was kind enough to listen. He would often reflect and say, "Well, we did try that back in 1982, or something similar." And I'd say, "But Dad, things have moved on, you know." So
Yeah.
there was a little bit of that, but I think by then he'd really resigned himself to the idea that I was going to be the future of the clinic, and with
Yeah.
all my energy, he was very happy um, to kind of guide me. I think it was very helpful actually having him because I had ideas that were above and beyond my budget, particularly, and he was very good at doing that thing of trying to hold the purse strings and say, "Look,
Yeah.
this is a great idea, but let's phase it in," or
Yeah.
are we sure that we can afford this? And those sorts of questions that the excitement of the moment can overtake you as a new little entrepreneur who doesn't really have that much experience.
Okay. Well, I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that you mentioned on the way through there. You mentioned the classic of documenting processes so that either you can bring in somebody new to use them. Was everything in your parents' head at that time? Again, it's not that unusual a situation with smaller businesses with the founder, but is that one of the reasons you needed to do it?
Yeah, it really was. So everything was in his head in a sort of brilliant way. I'm
Yeah.
not sure I could keep everything in my head in the same way anymore. But it was also quite limiting because it meant that we weren't able to share that with other practitioners or
Yeah.
employees even. So it was nice to sit there and think through the processes with him and try and develop new ideas about how things could run. So that also involved sort of interview sounds a bit strong, but talking to the receptionists and getting sort of feedback from the ground,
Yeah.
and the coal face, if you like, of the front desk,
Yeah.
um, and sort of rebuilding some of those processes so that they were much more robust
Yeah.
and clear to everyone. Because otherwise, we had, I think at the time we had maybe 12 practitioners, so 10 of them were all doing slightly different things, which then made the receptionist job so much harder
Yeah.
because they were doing, just booking a patient in 5 different ways for each person. So the
Yeah.
one task becomes 50 tasks, and there was no documentation. So yeah, so that's where we began really was in focusing on how we could do that better.
Excellent. So leading on from that, I can imagine that hiring a practice manager, because I've seen this type of business where a good practice manager is really worth their weight in gold to the business. Just taking off those basic tasks away from the fee earners, to put it in crude commercial terms.
Yeah, I mean, from an operational day-to-day basis, They are, or my practice manager particularly is brilliant at doing that, of taking on everything that's going on. So that could be anything from a phone call that requires a bit longer than the receptionist has,
Yeah,
or dealing with the power cut, or
yeah,
there are all sorts of things that pop up that as a
yeah,
clinician, you don't really want to be, you don't want to have to stop with your patient and
yeah,
say, look, I'm really sorry, I've got to go and sort out this problem.
yeah.
And so it's lovely having somebody on the day-to-day operational side doing all of that for you. It obviously comes with an expense, so
Yeah.
but with that you also gain the sort of space to expand into in terms of other practitioners perhaps,
Yeah.
or other people who can help you make a bigger business that can then afford these sorts of things. So there was definitely a turning point at which it became obvious that there was too much work for me and enough to make it worth a go.
Yeah.
And in doing that, we then had the space to develop into, and that made it profitable as a sort of thing to do.
Excellent.
Um, and it really helped with the patient experience, which for us was probably the most important thing
Yeah.
that we got out of it, was that both the patient experience with me as a clinician, so I wasn't always thinking about who was answering the phone and what was happening in the front reception, but also
Yeah.
from a patient experience of being welcomed into the practice and keeping on top of all those things.
Excellent. And those sort of systems and processes, I mean, it gave you a scalable framework. We'll come on to talk a little bit how you work with other clinicians in a moment. But you went up from, I'm not quite sure the exact size, but up to something like 12,500 patients a year you're treating now, ballpark
Yeah,
figure.
yeah, roughly, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Maybe
And so that's quite a volume going through there. And I can imagine those from whether it's the basic systems and processes and being more efficient in bringing in other clinicians must have been a real sea change in what you could do from where you were in 2006.
Yeah, I think it really was. I remember seeing the receptionist sort of with all her files on the right-hand side of her desk. So when someone would approach, you would pick up the file, open it up
Yeah,
to the right page, flick through to it used to take a long time to just book an appointment, and then it was just so much easier when you could see everything on the screen and she could move around the screen happily and book
yeah,
people in very quickly. So, I mean, stuff like that sounds very obvious these days because it's
yeah,
everywhere. But back in those days, it was a big shift. And how
yeah,
do you get all those patient records on the computer in
yeah,
the first place? Who was going to do that? And I remember going to the first training session with the receptionists and the practice manager software people.
yeah.
And the guy, I think it was about 2 hours in, the guy was holding up the mouse going, right, so everyone, we remember that the right mouse button. I was like, oh no, I hope they've learned everything because we're going live on Monday.
Right, right. Yeah,
So fortunately, I'd taken the Monday off, and they picked up a lot more than I gave them credit for anyway. And so, but yeah, by Monday we were going along okay, and everything bedded in quite quickly. But that did give me a bit of a scare.
yeah. I can imagine. I can imagine.
It's
Okay.
always hard when, I mean, particularly in our world, the front, the receptionists, and they almost become friends with
Yeah,
our clients, customers, patients, and so it's you have, yeah, there's a sort of a need to keep them as up to date as possible, and that was one of the issues that we faced, was how we deal with that, because it was a big change for them.
absolutely. No, I understand that. Okay, so look, so come back now to a little bit more of the guts of how you operate the business as a commercial entity. I know during that process of you sort of digging into the business, when you came into it, you started to look at room by room profitability, and then perhaps I think you might have changed how you work with other independent clinicians who are using your premises. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so I think my dad had been particularly keen on a sort of room rental basis where people would just pay a single fee for the room, and that
Yeah,
was their room to use. And it was very much easier for him then, because it was a small group of people, and it meant that he didn't need to service any of their needs particularly, except make sure the room was available and
yeah,
relatively clean. Um, but what I wanted to do was move us into more of a percentage paying basis, so that there was more of a collaborative feel between the
yeah,
practitioners and the and us as the clinic owners, and I think that worked really well. One of the first things we did was or I did, was to look at the kind of profit and loss
yeah,
kind of bank sheets and work out how much it's costing us to run a room, and then comparing that to how much actually we were charging for the room.
Yeah.
And that was quite an interesting moment, because we realised that actually one or two of the practitioners, we hadn't changed their room rents for years, just because it was all going quite happily,
Yeah.
and it wasn't sort of revisited, or not in light of any kind of KPI. So having done that, it was quite obvious that the situation would be fairer on a percentage basis, because then when a practitioner wasn't busy, they wouldn't be charged for the use of the room, and it was in our interest to keep them busy. So we then could market them with the feeling that actually this is great for both of us, rather than oh well, you're not busy, well at least our payment's still coming in. It creates a different sort of feel, and I think moving into a sort of percentage process was much better for that collaborative feel. And now almost everybody is on a percentage rather than a room rental. And while it's a little bit more anxiety inducing from a what if everyone suddenly got quiet perspective, we've got a good brand and we've been around for a long time, so you get over that quite quickly. But if you looked at our appointment book for 6 months' time, of course there's hardly anyone in it. It's not the way our kind of business works. So so it does look quite worrying, but cash flow is very regular, and it all works okay.
Good. So just for people who may not fully understand, most of your independent clinicians that you work with, they're sort of self-employed practitioners, basically, who pay a percentage fee to the Summertown Clinic.
Yeah, that's right. So they're all autonomous practitioners in their own right, which is handy, because there are other sort of issues that creep in if they are employed. So in terms of sick pay and holiday, but also professional development. So what tends to happen is that if you take that model on as a clinic, you tend to give them a lower sort of income than they would expect to get if they were self-employed. And so a lot of people look at it and go, oh, I don't really want that. I'd rather be self-employed. So by keeping it self-employed, by giving them the autonomy to do what they want to do, then they feel much more motivated, I think, to offer their patients the best possible care that they can. And that's one of our core mission statements, is to try and be the best we can in our field. And I think it works really well like that. I have looked at the employed version of things, but it just isn't manageable from lots of different perspectives. And we're very lucky in having a good set of practitioners, both in osteopathy, but chiropractic, audiology, dietary, acupuncture, massage therapy, and talking therapies, all of whom have a really great background. Certainly, I'm just wondering if I can say kind of internationally recognized level of quality. I don't know how I could claim that, but yes. It's that level, and to keep those people, the way we do that is to offer them good terms of practice and to allow them to be as autonomous as possible, so that they can find their own motivation through what they do, rather than dictating how we want the style of things to be, even though they're all under the umbrella business of Summertown Clinic. So when somebody comes in, it's nice, smooth, hopefully very smooth journey for the patient that follows a Summertown Clinic path. But behind that is the autonomous nature of them being their own practitioner in our space.
Excellent. Okay, well, I understand that. Now, there's one topic that, whatever the type of business, that always gets mentioned, and that is what happened in 2020 with COVID. And I think for the first time in something around 45, 46 years or something, you had to close your doors.
That's
so
right.
A little bit about the impact of COVID on your business. That must have tested your resilience.
I think it must have been very scary for a lot of businesses. Certainly, as people who treat, I'd say our demographic is relatively elderly, around the 60s is probably the average age of our patients. But we certainly, I've got patients who are in their 90s, and so we were very aware of infection control generally. And when as COVID came along, there were the regulators. So being a regulated professional as well, we have to follow the regulators' guidelines. and they were quite quick to close things down. I think it was 23rd of March or something, wasn't it,
Yeah.
in 2000? Everything got closed down very fast. And that was a bit of a shock because, as you say, we'd never been closed before. We didn't really know what to do. Um, so we were quite lucky in that we own our own building, so we didn't have a rental issue to deal with, but we did have things like furlough and when were we going to be open? No one really knew. All the PPE stuff that began to be, were we going to have to kind of walk around like astronauts all day and deal with that sort of infection risk? As it happened, in that we had a sort of rebuild or sort of redecorating thing that went on in 2017 and put some aircon units in, which is quite helpful because that could help with the flow of air around the building. Because there were some very detailed sort of regulated things that came in. We had to have a one-way system around the clinic.
Right.
We tried to set up a virtual receptionist. So there was an iPad on the desk where you would talk to the iPad, and she was sat in another room so that there wasn't any kind of cross-contamination risk.
Yeah.
It was kind of crazy times now. Looking back at it, we did wear all our PPE, so we did look a bit like astronauts. Had sort of masks, gloves, and all this sort of stuff on. But I think that so all us regulated professionals were in sort of about 7 or 8 weeks into it. So then it was a case of trying to reassure patients that we were doing everything by the rules, and so lots of videos and posts about what we looked like and things to not scare anyone. It was a strange time. People hang around outside so that they didn't have to come into an area that was too close, and so it took a bit of time to sort out, and we even had builders put in a sort of cover for the outside building so that when you walk around the building you didn't get wet. So there's a lot of thought that went into it. We got through it. We did get a business loan, but we got through it, I guess, mainly on the basis of the community that we have. So the practitioners and the receptionists all talking on WhatsApp a lot, and we did Zoom. We tried to pivot and do kind of Zoom consultations. A little bit hard because most of what we do is manual therapy. But it did work. I did quite a few where you could get the patient to do different examination movements and try and give them stretches and lifestyle advice. So there was a bit of pivoting, but we got back into it relatively quickly. It took a long time to build up the same level of kind of patient throughput as we had before, because some of the non-regulated professionals like masseurs, for instance, couldn't come back, and talking therapists weren't interested because they got used to Zoom. So it took them a lot longer to go back to the face-to-face stuff. And so that was difficult sort of business model wise, but I'm very pleased that we got through it all.
Excellent.
There were several.
Well, no, it was an unusual challenge. So coming up to sort of the current time, and the other theme that is pretty common across virtually all businesses I talk to these days is application of technology, and particularly artificial intelligence in your business, whether that's for how you run the business or actually in how you treat patients. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you're using it today, and is it a threat to therapists? I'm guessing not yet, anyway. As far as anybody can say about anything, I suppose. But tell us a little bit about AI or other technologies that might be helping you develop the business further.
Yeah, it was a very exciting time, I think. So I've been following AI for the last 18 months or so, and really getting into how it's going to be helping us. So I don't see it as taking over our roles. I think that face-to-face clinical work is going to be the future. It'll just be augmented. And I think the AI so the role of the AI within our treatment is so as we're using it at the moment, we use it for transcription software. So I'll have a conversation with you, and it means my whole focus is on the patient. I'm not sitting there trying to remember where the T button is on my keyboard or anything like that, or the old single finger typing. So it makes that sort of side of things much smoother. And then the output from the AI is very good as well. So the quality of what it produces is, I'd say, better than my previous notes. So that's nice too. So that's one use case, but marketing, patient reports are quite interesting. So anonymizing the content of what you then use in AI to produce a really nice summary of what
Yeah.
patients. So there are various pinch points within our business model. One of which is making sure that patients are aware of what we've been speaking about. I think it's something like 20% of what you actually say in a consultation is taken in by your patient. So
Yeah.
it's nice to have a really lovely summary afterwards, emailed to the patient. We can do that
Yeah.
quite easily. Things like following guidelines. There are literally thousands and thousands of different healthcare guidelines in our world of healthcare.
Yeah.
Many of which we're not even aware of. But it's quite easy to look at how those reflect with your patient using AI in a way that we've never been able
Yeah.
to do before, and then that highlights how we can get the GP involved if required. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that from a clinic perspective, AI is very helpful with particularly the administrative kind of aspect of things, and feeding the task of NHS-based data into what we do on a day-to-day basis as non-NHS
Yeah.
people, and serving our patients better through using AI is really the core of what we're trying to use it for.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm doing a lot in this world. So I've set up a little side business, if you like, called Co-Practice, which is basically trying to get osteopaths to be more AI literate. It was one of the
Right.
things that the General Osteopathic Council said, this is all wonderful, but nobody knows how to use AI in osteopathy. So I said, well, why don't we teach them? So I created a little online course, a freebie for everyone. And then I've built a couple of apps and things through. I use Claude a lot. I really like
Yeah.
Claude, and I built several apps to try and help osteopaths. The other thing that it's really good for, I find, is research. So
Yeah.
I use Claude to pick up the top 50 sources on a particular topic, and
Yeah.
I then get those articles and put them in something called Notebook LM, which I really love. And then you can quiz those sources only, and you can
Yeah.
create things like podcasts for your patients or
Yeah.
videos and things. And that's the little nugget that I'm working with at the moment to create some really good patient resources that help them appreciate that what we're doing is, builds that kind of trust, because
Yeah.
what we're doing is evidence informed. They begin to like us because we're providing it for free or for giving them good
Yeah.
advice. And so that really helps them really know what we're about, rather than thinking that we're sort of behind a screen all the time. So AI is being very helpful, but very interesting how that moves into our realm as osteopaths, and allied healthcare professionals in the future. I think there will be a time where it becomes more clinically relevant,
Right.
but that's not now, and the regulators can't keep up with the speed that AI is going at. So it's really difficult for them. Every time you write a paper on it, of course, it's changed.
Yeah.
So how do you keep up with that?
Absolutely. And going back to your sort of original interest there from elite sport, I think there's some things going on in concussion protocols and things like that. So I mean, it's not just your immediate patient relationship. There's another area of research. Is
Yeah,
that
that's
right?
right. So I have a friend. One of my colleagues, Joel, is an osteopath, and he's been working with the Premiership as part of his master's degree in sports medicine, looking at concussion indicators and things like using your mobile phone to decide or help you diagnose whether a
Yeah.
player is likely to be concussed and at what stage, I think it is, of their concussion. So he's been doing lots of really exciting stuff with that, and working with West Ham as well on another kind of AI idea.
Yeah.
And so all those sort of extra bits. I mean, I wear a Whoop device. I think
Yeah.
lots of wearable technology is out there, and using that to identify and help our patients is going to be a really powerful, or is already, but can be used as a really powerful tool as soon as we can leverage that effectively without. I think one of our biggest issues is GDPR, and keeping data safe
Yeah.
for our patients is obviously a priority for anybody in the healthcare industry. But that's the big issue. I think that AI is already capable of doing quite a lot of these things. So sharing prompts and things with patients is quite
Yeah.
useful, so that they can be in charge of their own data, and highlighting where GDPR could be a worry for them. But it's so powerful, being able to cross-reference their data with all sorts of other metrics, that you can build a really in-depth health sort of view of somebody
Yeah.
very fast and very accurately. There are still hallucinations and things to be aware of. So the human in the loop is still very important. The practitioner being in charge or responsible of dealing with that data for the patient on behalf of the patient, so that it's translated almost and double checked for standard, I think will always be will always be useful. And I think that's one of the big things that a lot of people miss out on in this whole debate about how useful AI is going to be, is that actually it's not going to take over jobs in the way that people think, because you're going to need the human in the loop aspect to it. So particularly in healthcare, it just means we can, a radiologist might be able to see 1,000 X-ray pictures rather than 15, because rather than having to look through them all, the AI will look for certain things, and then they'll just be able to spend a minute or two looking at them rather than.
Absolutely. No, I understand that. No, that's really interesting and fascinating where it's going to take us, probably to sort of eventually sort of quite highly personalized treatment for all sorts of conditions. But the ones you mentioned, concussion in sport, etc., are really vital to keep the safety aspects of those contact sports, keeping them safe in the long term. As we move on a bit, James, I'd just like to think a little bit about the future. Yeah, and in a sense, we've been talking about it with AI and how it can assist you and develop you both as a business, but also as a practitioner. But in terms of your business, from when your parents owned and ran it to where you are now, you haven't moved out of Summertown. I know from some of the other things you do, which I'd like to hear a little about. You're very community focused, but I guess there was some people might think, well, why not go to even other parts of Oxfordshire, or let alone expanding more widely? What's your thinking behind keeping Summertown Clinic very much as Summertown Clinic and building a community from there? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was something that we around 2017, 2018, something like that, we were beginning to look at an alternative site, either a satellite clinic or a second clinic somewhere. In fact, we looked at one in Italy.
Right.
But I'm very pleased that we didn't actually get it. We were outbid by a friend. So I was very pleased we didn't get it, because I think I would have overstretched myself. And one of the issues with having second places and satellite clinics is that you do get the opportunity to get into another population of patients, which is nice, but you lose that, or you can lose that sense of ownership. So particularly in a patient-facing clinic like ours, I think it's quite hard to franchise a model that relies on the key people being the key people. If I was to create Summertown Clinic in, I don't know, Cowley or something, it part of Summertown Clinic is me as James Ruddick, has been my dad and my mum as as their involvement, and all the other practitioners. So it has to be practitioner led, I think, and so it's not something that we've developed into. Instead, we've been trying to take Summertown Clinic out of the clinic. So we've been looking at other community projects that we can get involved with. So I'm now the Summertown Stars chairperson, and so I help run that football club, which I enjoy immensely. But it's also been quite an interesting kind of way of promoting or getting out into the sports injuries world. And there's, off the back of that, actually, I met Tom Murray, who's involved in the church, and they've set up with the aging the Institute of Aging Population at Oxford University. They've set up a health hub with us in Cutterslow, which is just due to kick off next week, actually. Which is very exciting. It's aimed at trying to affect the levels of frailty in the elderly population. There is the kind of is the actual kind of research base, but we're going to be setting up as a lunch hub and an opportunity for people to learn about their health and to help get people the help that they need when they need it. So lots of advice, lots of that research that I talked about earlier, AI and getting that research out to people so that they know what to do and how to do it. And they've got.
And would this be aimed at the elderly population, or is it anybody that might be going through a sort of health challenges?
Particularly the elderly in that particular area, and it's something that they're looking to roll out across. There are 4 different sites in Oxfordshire as their pilot, but they want to roll it out across the whole of the country. So it's a very exciting project to be involved with, and particularly at such early stages. and we're looking at how we can be really positive with people's health at that age.
Yeah.
So things like isolation, there's been quite a lot in the papers about
Yeah.
how isolation is now considered to be as bad as smoking 15 a day.
Yeah.
That loneliness factor. And so just even having a community hub that people come along to and enjoy a free lunch and have a chat with other people
Yeah.
already ticks, some of that.
A number of boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed that in the football club as well.
Yeah.
The idea of volunteering has lots of health benefits associated with it, from running up and down the touchline to intergenerational kind of friendships,
Yeah.
to cognitive function. All of these things are actually available to us. But rather than putting them in a pill, it's a Saturday morning down at the football club.
Yeah.
So it's sort of repackaging that and
Yeah. And it's fair to say, I know the Summertown Stars, the football club it's really successful. It's something like nearly 1,000 players, is it up there?
Yeah, we've got just over 900 players, and 64 teams. So it's a big club, and we oh, hello. Yes, so sorry. So it's a big club, and we have 270 girls playing in the team as well, in the club as well. So it's nice and balanced. We need more resources, of course, like any club that's growing like that. But we are the biggest club in Oxfordshire, and biggest youth club, I suppose, in Oxfordshire as well by default.
Yeah,
and it's just lovely. Lovely to see so many.
And you're currently chairman of the club, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So trying to balance all of these different things is quite tough.
Yeah, no, you need an AI practice manager for that as well, probably.
Funny you should say that. I am looking at their processes and constantly. I've just built a fixtures generator, for instance, because it takes volunteers hours of their time, and it can all be done automatically if you just sit there and try and create the software that allows people to do that. So I've just done that, and I'm very excited about it because it's actually much better than I thought it would be.
Excellent, very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, it's been a fantastic journey learning about Summertown Clinic, both your own personal journey into doing this and the future, the current status, and the future of this type of healthcare, which I think is going to change significantly, hopefully for the better for patients' benefit over the coming years. And you sound to have a great, in my mind, I'm putting my sort of business coach sort of hat on here, sort of a balance between community, which is so important for most sort of businesses, but also an understanding of the efficiencies and how to make a business run efficiently, which is obviously important, whatever type of business you're operating. So thank you very much for taking us through that time. We've talked about everything from AI through to incentive for practitioners, community focus, structure, how to take a business with old style practices up and modernize them, deal with COVID, as well as going into research mode with the Frailty Hub, the Anti-Frailty Hub. So thank you very much, James. That's been a tour de force. And so just finally, if anybody wants to get in touch, it's these, just double check I've got this right. We'll put this on the links to this, the Summertown Clinic, oneword.co.uk for the website. Is there any other way people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, that's us, or feel free to email me directly at jamesruddick@summertownclinic.co.uk. Okay. And again, maybe we can put that on the
absolutely. And would that apply for things if somebody was interested in the Anti-Frailty Hub or even the Summertown Stars?
Just check it. I've got about 6 different email addresses, so you could go to chair@summertownstars.org
right
for the Summertown Stars stuff. But no, if you're happy just using that one email address, that's fine.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you again. It's really, I'd summarize this as being sort of a blueprint for modernizing a legacy business without losing its heart. And I think that's been a fantastic tour de force. So thanks again, James. And recommend anybody that needs those services to get in touch with you. Thank you.